In this video, I'm going to address the first ASU student question for the book, Why You Need a Foreign Language and How to Learn One. And this first student concerns the issue of the next lingua franca in the future after English. So the question reads, in Why You Need a Foreign Language and How to Learn One, you write, if your society possesses disproportionate cultural, military, or economic strength, then your language will achieve dominance over neighboring languages. So in your opinion, which language will be the next lingua franca and why? And what will the effects of this be? Well, my answer is this. I don't foresee a single replacement for English as a global lingua franca. And that's because the status of English as it has been since the mid-20th century is based on some unique circumstances, namely the Cold War and America's relative strength compared to other nations after World War II. These circumstances are unlikely to be repeated in the future, as they are unlikely to continue in the case of English. So I don't see another language achieving the same degree of dominance as English does. What will influence the language situation in the future will be what Fareed Zakaria calls the rise of the rest. And what this means is that while America will remain a major global economic and military power, perhaps even the strongest in the foreseeable future, America's marginal advantage will decrease. So it will be not just the U.S. as the single dominant nation, but the U.S. and other nations will sort of share hegemony globally. And this will lead to the rise of regional lingua francas, including English. So this is what the regionally significant global lingua francas might be in 2050. And there's not a whole lot of, this is not entirely prognostication because a lot of this already exists this way. Let's look at these one by one. First of all, Chinese. China has the fastest growing economy in the world as well as the largest population. Also, the Chinese government actively promotes the study of Mandarin outside China. I think that the Chinese language is somewhat tied up with Chinese national pride and the pride of China's pride at it being a resurgent nation. Chinese is also a very popular language outside China. Chinese language courses are multiplying throughout the world. You can, of course, see this throughout the news. Another important issue is the fact that Chinese encounters relatively little political resistance beyond its native borders, as is sometimes the case with Russian, in certain parts of Europe due to memories of the USSR, as can be the case with English due to fears of cultural imperialism, and even in the case of Spanish due to concerns about undocumented immigration, especially in the United States. Also significant is the fact that China is becoming a key trading partner for other Asian nations like South Korea and Japan. Trade within the Asian region with China was comparatively insignificant during the Mao era, and now it's very significant. Another regional lingua franca is Spanish, and the reasons for this are Latin American political and economic stability are improving in recent decades. There are still some parts of Latin America that have a ways to go, but if you compare the situation in Latin America today, say compared to the 1970s, it's definitely night and day. Regional trade and political unions are growing within the region. Spanish is an easier language for Portuguese-speaking Brazilians to learn than any other global language. Also, international trade within the Spanish-speaking world is increasing, and this diminishes the importance of English as a business language within Latin America. And I saw this myself a number of years ago when I was in Brazil. I found that there were more Brazilian business persons who had a good command of Spanish than English. And I asked them about it, and they said that, of course, they cited the fact that Spanish was easier for them to learn, but also the fact that Spanish was more relevant for them because of the proximity of so many Spanish-speaking countries with growing economies. Also, the Spanish-speaking population is already around 330 million, making Spanish a numerically significant language. Russian. Russian was an unpopular, though dominant lingua franca during the existence of the Soviet Union from 1917 to 1991. After a brief surge during the Gorbachev era, Russian language studies largely declined throughout the world in the 1990s. However, the Russian economy has improved considerably since the 1990s, when we had the ruble crisis and other sorts of economic turmoil during the Yeltsin era. Russia is determined to reassert itself as a major global power. There's a strong sense of nationalism within Russia, particularly among younger Russians who don't have any memories of the Soviet era. Other Slavic nations, for example, Serbia, have a strong affinity with Russia and have similar languages. So Russian is a language that has some appeal beyond its borders. Arabic. Arabic is already a regionally significant lingua franca in much of the Middle East. However, there are some real political problems within the Arabic-speaking world, and this, of course, impacts the growth of the economies in Arabic-speaking countries. Most non-native Arabic speakers, most non-native students of the Arabic language, learn Arabic for religious, cultural, or security/law enforcement reasons, or just because of a general curiosity. The main point here is that Arabic is not yet significant as a business language, at least compared to languages like English, Chinese, or Spanish. The future significance of Arabic as a business language and as a real viable lingua franca will depend on political stability and economic growth within the Middle East. And finally, English. English in the foreseeable future will of course remain the dominant lingua franca in the US, Canada, Australia, and Western Europe. English will also remain the lingua franca for simple and routine communications, for example, airport customs, international shipping instructions, etc., where basic communications will suffice. The results of this. The results will be the diversification of global pop culture. Non-English movies, music, etc. will increase in popularity. This is something, of course, that we already can see. Languages other than English will increase their presence on the internet. This is something that also is already the case, particularly in the case of Chinese and Japanese. English will no longer be seen as the only logical choice for individuals throughout the world wishing to acquire a second language. An increasing number of trade publications and technical papers will be published in languages other than English. This is something, too, which is already underway. There are already a lot of technical papers being published in China, for example, that are not necessarily being translated into English. So business persons, and this would include, of course, people in fields like engineering, research, etc., from the English-speaking world will need to master other languages for practical reasons rather than for purely cultural reasons or for the purpose of being courteous. And basic greetings will no longer be enough. They'll have to really master these languages, just as people abroad have had to master English in the past for business reasons. Because English will no longer be the default business language in every region.